What do you think the first word out of my mouth is going to be? Change. Everything seems to be changing around us. Last week I invited you to feel how change has thrust us as a people into something of a wilderness. How we are somewhat like the Israelites wandering for 40 years. I asked you to find hope in understanding that and engaging what this time is doing to us. And today the focus is still on change, but more on inner change. So remember, the Israelites wandered for 40 years because they rebelled against God by wanting to return to Egypt instead of facing new challenges in the Promised Land. And that is key to hear and understand. They wanted to return to the familiar. They could not accept the new. But God used this time anyway to prepare them, to foster growth. God taught them to trust. In the wilderness is where we should go deeper with God. Today I'll focus not on 40 years of wandering with others, but on 40 days of sitting with yourself and God in wilderness, like Jesus did. Change happens to us. It is often beyond our control. And maybe that is how Jesus felt. Then Jesus was led up by the Spirit into the wilderness to be tested by the devil. He fasted 40 days and 40 nights, and afterwards he was famished. In the Gospel of Mark, instead of the word led, the more forceful driven is used. He was driven into the wilderness. That makes it seem like a change that Jesus didn't really see coming and maybe didn't have much time to prepare for. It's a major event that presents Jesus time and space to learn how he will respond to challenges, to being tempted by food, comfort, and water, and power. And Jesus had time to consider how he would react, the chance to be and experience differently, to grow in understanding of self and God. I caught part of an interview with Brene Brown on NPR last week. And this is what she said. She said that between stimulus and response, there is a space. And in that space is the power of choice. And in that choice is our growth and freedom. So you have stimulus and response, and you got that space in there to choose and have some growth and freedom. But she went on to say that right now, that stimulus and response are just smashed together. They're just smashed together. But it's the job right now of great leaders in our families, in our own lives, wherever, to create a space between stimulus and response. There is a space between stimulus and response. And in that space is the power of choice, and we need that. I immediately thought about how not choosing well is really harming our relationships and how we function in society. But how Jesus reacted to his stimulus, being driven into the wilderness after this affirming, baptismal, special awakening moment with God, is different. He had time to experience, reflect, and determine how he would react to that stimulus and others that would follow. So how can we honor space, make it longer, make it deeper, so that we make better choices that lead to growth, so that changes that come our way don't control us? Political change, cultural change, church change, it all connects with personal change. and it all invites personal transformation. When life leaves you weak, are you ever able to sit, resist moving in the usual ways, engage with God, name things in new ways? Or do you simply react on instinct? When you are driven into foreign, emotional territory and tested, where is God? How do you deal with chances to exit that uncomfortable space? To take back some power, control, and comfort? The text today makes it seem so easy for Jesus to resist the devil. But there is a lot between the lines, and 40 days is a long time. How are you tempted to react to the changes happening around us? I have caught myself either over-engaging and thinking I can do more than I really can because I want to see change, or under-engaging and being lazy because I am not directly affected. I am tempted by comfort, just as Jesus was, tempted to withdraw to the security I know, and blaming is a temptation, to get rid of my anger and sadness by placing it elsewhere and on other people. But I know that's not really the best course. I need to wonder more about change. So I try to sit with big questions about what I've thought and done in years past. Was that well informed? Too aligned with the status quo? Too dismissive of legitimate concerns and needs? I am not totally clear on all the specifics of where that will go, or even what it means just to say some of it. I'm just trying to open to alternative paths and answers as I evaluate my allegiances to groups, thoughts, and investments of energy. I'm trying to resist leaving my wilderness in 40 days and going back to business as usual. Back to ignoring things that are inconvenient or don't jeopardize my way of life. Pretty human stuff. Probably not too foreign to some of you. And I resist going back because despite Jesus being fully divine and knowing what his journey needed to be, remember, he was also fully human. This is part of the mystery of our theology and faith. Fully human, fully divine. The fully divine Jesus knew how the story would play out, what would happen. But the fully human Jesus needed to experience it. Needed to experience it, needed to feel it. So what was Jesus like between the lines of this passage? Between the verses in which he seems to so easily rebuff the devil? Was he frightened? Did he want more information? Did he feel alone? I guess we can't totally know, but maybe we can engage what we feel. Have you ever fasted? Done a retreat that had fasting as part of that rhythm to help you grow? How about just preparing for a doctor's appointment? One night of fasting. Got to give up that Starbucks in the morning. And if it's an 11 o'clock appointment, you're really in trouble. Take whatever you know of fasting, what that feels like, and wonder what it would be like to do for 40 days with the devil offering you escape and power. Several years ago at a semi-silent retreat, I talked with a man who had taken part in a unique wilderness experience. He did four-day solo silent retreats while fasting. You heard me right, four-day solo retreats. Every 6 months or so, he went to a different remote wilderness spot in the Colorado mountains for 4 days with only water and a tarp to sleep under or do whatever would help. He sat in a circle in one place and fasted for 4 days. We didn't have time for him to fully share how he grew, but I could tell it had transformed him. It had transformed him in some ways. I could feel it. But what he did share was how his awareness and sense of time changed when he wasn't thinking about eating, preparing food, actually eating, cleaning up, etc. All the stuff we do several times a day. He said he had all this time, and time changed. So maybe we don't need 40 days of fasting. Maybe we just need the openness to a new time and the courage to stay in it with God. Time and experience. Parker has just been part of an important experience. He has accepted a gift from God. As opposed to an infant, Parker chose to be baptized. He even said that up here. He chose. This is his claiming of faith. There was some stimulus or stimuli that put him on a journey to respond. He eventually said yes to God, and we trust God will be with him in the years to come. Moreover, unlike an infant, Parker can understand today's message. At least to some degree, he grasped that life will not be perfect just because he is baptized. He knows he may be driven into tough situations and there will be temptations. And he knows he has the example of Jesus' 40 days to help. So today, as a young adult, Parker honors and reminds us to honor the power of choice. And we affirm the power of community, of being in this together. That is a choice. And that is where we may find hope in all this change. Last week, I lifted up Amy Oden's thoughts about the Israelites finding God in the wilderness. Let me remind you what she said. It is here in the wilderness, with no map, no resources, no food or water to rely on, that the Hebrews encounter God. The crowd turns to face the wilderness as though trying to envision the manna there. And what do they see? The glory of God. There has been nothing like this sort of encounter with Yahweh up to this point for the wandering people. It is only once the people enter the wilderness and complain that God's glory appears to them. In today's gospel, after Jesus is alone dealing with inner temptations, the devil leaves him, and suddenly angels come and wait on him. I can't imagine the fully human Jesus didn't struggle and complain and almost give in to temptation before that moment. But he stayed true to what God was doing with him, to him. And God came to him just as God came to the Israelites. Last week, I also introduced a form of Ignatian prayer, whereby Christians immerse themselves in a biblical setting and scene, in which you would transport or place yourself back to one of these scripture passages, back to the actual place, and rely on your senses to draw practical fruit for your life. The goal is to make scriptures come alive so that you can make a personal application to your life. I hope I have given you enough to prayerfully transport yourself to a wilderness and just sit there, maybe with Jesus, maybe sometime this week. You'll struggle and likely complain. So be it. Just don't go back. Like the Israelites in the wilderness and like Jesus in his, we can't return to the familiar. We must accept a new way. With all the recent attention in the Middle East and hopes for progress, I found myself thinking about the people I have met there and traveled with. Unique Israeli and Palestinian peacemakers who deeply move me, who have been convicted about a different way towards peace and living together. They are leaders and just in some ways regular people who have the vision, courage, and fortitude to seek reconciliation, to pursue a different way despite being victims of violence, in many cases losing family members to the other side. To pursue a different way even though they are marginalized, often by their friends, for their countercultural views on relating to the other. They act from a place that is deeper than I can imagine. They are in touch with something spiritual and a way of being and seeing the other that only comes from experiences that no one wants, and from great awareness, intention, and struggle. They do their sitting in the wilderness. They fight temptation. Their witness gives me hope for how I can be transformed in the midst of change. Jesus transformed in the wilderness because he trusted and grew. He left knowing more about his calling. He was focused. And one of the first things he did was to recruit others. I wonder if these Israeli and Palestinian peacemakers are the kind of people that Jesus tapped to be his disciples when he left the wilderness, that he understood their potential and then developed in a whirlwind of change, in a whirlwind of telling them the world is changing and you need to change. And how do they resist the temptation to go back? Show up here on November 1st with John and maybe find out. Maybe hear a little bit about that. Change and stimuli will drive us into our own wilderness. May we have the strength and courage to stay there with God. May we learn emotionally, psychologically, and spiritually. May we respond after our 40 days in ways that honor growth and change. We are free to choose that, and that is good news. Amen.